First of all, I want to welcome everybody to the Global Construction Tech Podcast. My name is Eliyahu Rappaport, and I am the host of this show. On this podcast, we host real construction experts who share their real insights from real experience in the field. So very excited to welcome Tadeh Hakopian to the podcast. Tadeh is one of the earliest adopters of BIM that I spoke to and has been working with BIM since 2007. Since then, he's worked on very exciting projects, and hopefully we'll cover some of them today on the podcast. Hi, Tadeh. How you doing?
Hi, Eli. How you been, man? Thanks for having me on the podcast.
For sure. Thank you for joining. So during this podcast, we will ask a bunch of questions, and one of the key ones is just tell me about yourself.
Sure. Easy question because I know a lot about myself, so we'll start that way. As you mentioned, I am Tadeh Hakopian, and I am based out of California, Southern California specifically, more specifically Los Angeles, grew up here, and I have over 10 years of experience in AEC using BIM, VDC, data programming to make a better project. And I have a degree in architecture, and that's where I started learning about all sorts of technologies, also methodologies for working on projects and buildings and using data. And I think I started using Revit as a BIM software around 2008, maybe 2009. I'm kind of blurry on details. I think I originally learned about it in BIM in general around 2007. I was learning AutoCAD at the time in school, and I saw my instructor use Revit for the first time. I heard about it, but never seen it before. And he took a door component and placed it into a wall, and the door instantly just showed up, and you didn't have to, cut things and trim things out like you normally do in AutoCAD. And he said, now that the door's in there, you can actually see it in every view of your project, floor plan, elevation. And I was astonished at what I had just seen. At the time, this was like voodoo technology. I've never seen anything quite like that, because if anybody's ever used AutoCAD much at all, especially for things like moving doors and windows and anything, you have to literally edit every single line yourself every time something changes, then edit in every view, the elevation, your floor plan. So when I saw Revit do its magic, I was like, wow, I gotta learn this. So like a year later, I started learning it myself, just to make my life easier in studio and projects, because you have to do so many building designs in architecture school, and I don't want to spend all my time editing lines. I just quickly put a building together in Revit, and I got hooked onto it really early in my education, my career, and that's where BIM kind of started coming into play for me. At school, I also learned a lot about sustainable design, very data-centric way of working. How do you justify designing and building something based on things like lighting analysis, solar analysis, carbon intensity of the materials you're using, the sourcing of those materials, the long-term impact, and that was something I was always interested in, along with how can I use these technologies and tools like BIM, like Revit, like anything else I'm using to help me justify what I'm doing, help prove that I have a better solution than a week ago. And from there, graduated with that knowledge in architecture, renewable design, data, BIM, and got to working on a lot of projects right away since I knew enough tool sets. I got my first internship because I knew Revit as a software. This is like 2011, before a lot of companies were even thinking about Revit. I knew it because I worked on school. I knew BIM because I worked on enough at school to get my first job that required Revit. So that's a little bit about my early background and profession and where I started using it.
That's incredible. And I think that, there's so many people alongside you who saw the professor, do the same thing. And for some reason, it just lit something up. You got passionate about it, you got curious, and you dove in. So that's incredible, because really most of the time, as you said, even 2011, right, there are very few people in the industry that were actually applying Revit in almost in any way. So that's incredible. Kind of how do you gravitate towards what you're doing right now, and how do you see yourself also, that the projection of like where you're going with your career, where you're going with like the roles that you're taking on today?
That's a great question, because when I started at this out, I talk about my school years over a decade ago, I didn't think I was going to become a BIM expert or it's kind of design technology, however we want to describe the broader field. I thought I was okay, this is going to be a great tool set to help me in my career because, at the time, if, learning any kind of BIM software like Revit, ArchiCAD, whatever, was an accessory to just working, being a better architect or engineer or whatever you're doing in the building spaces, right? So I thought, okay, well, this would be a great tool. I can use it to my advantage. This would help me stand out from the crowd. And if I can, show them my skills there can help with the project, that could just, help me support the project a little better, but I'll focus on the core skills to be like an architect. But really early on in my career, I realized BIM was an interesting field to be in. I liked a lot of things about how you can use building information modeling, the data therein, the processes. I was a very process-driven person just by nature. Then BIM requires you to, have your act together and make sure everything, is lined up and you have all your sources and everything's organized and you're doing the right thing. Otherwise, it'll all kind of not work. It'll just be a mess. So over the years, I just got better at understanding how to support a project based on how we get the design intent from people's heads into some kind of digital asset like a model, perhaps a spreadsheet, and then use that to process a project, making sure we have all these great data points available to us, and be able to use that to develop a project and design in construction, into delivery, into operation. So that's kind of the thread I've been working on all these years. Is how do we take these data points instead of just kind of putting them in one place only and then leaving them there? How do we evolve it for the long term so it becomes a renewable asset in a sense where the data we have from one project can be used throughout that project without having disconnected points? They all just kind of speak fluidly to each other from one stage to another. We're continuously using that data and then be able to use that data on one project to help us understand the next project by using historical information, using lessons learned from the last project, and using design criteria, results, and applications from the last project into the next project. So that's kind of what I've been working on over the last several years, is how do we use that data better? And that's where I'm taking my career and my emphasis the next couple of years, starting the last several years, going to the future. Is how do we take data and make it more useful in the process? Because that won't just be beneficial for BIM or design or just construction, will be beneficial for everybody because we have connected data. And that's been something that if you worked at tech companies for the last 15, 20 years, that we've been doing that. But when it comes to the field of architecture, engineering, construction, AEC, even just people operating the buildings who already, just people have a portfolio of projects and buildings, a portfolio manager and operations in these built spaces, they don't really have connected data very well. They're getting there. I think people have seen examples of connected data. I've seen it in very controlled settings like a university campus or a medical campus, what have you. I know, for example, that, tech campuses like Google, Facebook, Apple, so on, they have a lot of internal connected data just for building operations. I think that's something that can be very beneficial. So that's something we're working on, is how do we take all these different data points and not just have them in a BIM model or a spreadsheet, but really connect them into a live environment. So people call this a digital twin environment. That's something I've been working on for the last year or two, is to how do we make all these data points evolve into something like a digital twin, something like a database that it could be a very great resource that can help the project and assets in every single way. So that's something I see as kind of like the future potential that I've been eyeing and developing. And there's a lot of potential using BIM technologies for that, and a lot of other related technologies for that moving forward.
Wow. I mean, I'll tell you, like, we live in the age of information. And one of the things that, draw me so much towards the construction technology, I'd say, sector within, within the, because I specialize, for years, I analyzed tech companies, and what really drew me into the construction tech space was just how little information's actually being utilized, within the industry. And we live in the age of information, and really the applications that we're seeing are just becoming more and more advanced and interesting and exciting. And I could just hear it from you, your experience, like you shed some light maybe on a few of the things like digital twinning that you're touching upon, and taking historical data and using it and ensuring that the data moves on from stage to stage. these are things that have really widespread challenges, I think, currently in the industry. So maybe, leading on to the next question is, what kind of advancements have you seen so far, from where you are? Because again, you're communicating with a lot of people. You're trying to get, at the end of the data is something you need to source. At the beginning, it starts with the people, and then afterwards the implementation, stage to stage, all those things are more interactions with people, and then capturing that information, utilizing that information. Like, how do you see like the advancements since you've gotten in? And I'm gonna give a preview to the next question, which is, what hurdles and challenges have you been seeing, in this process that you were describing?
Eli, I'm glad you brought up hurdles and challenges, because the advancements always have a hurdle and challenge in this field. It could be in any real field, but it's more so in AEC because everything's so fragmented. Given the historic model, you got one person who's the owner, who pays everybody, who wants a project, who wants whatever, a skyscraper, let's say. They want a big, fancy skyscraper, and this is going to be their big project. They get the financing. They then hire the architect to come up with the concept, take it from there. The architect hires the team of engineers behind him. The owner gets the drawings from this team of designers, who then hires a separate company for contracting and building, who then hires his own people for everything he needs to build a project, subcontractors, suppliers, who also has to go talk to the architect to get information. But these are separate groups of people hired by the same person, who is like a three-way triangle of trying to work together in order to go from a concept to design to construction to completion. That might go to somebody else at the end of the day, to operations and maintenance company, that kind of thing. So as you can see, it's a very challenging environment to take a thing, a tower, a skyscraper, any, whatever, a tool shed, whatever we're trying to build here. It's the same actual process when you think about it. It's like multiple partners working together to get to a result for one person. And even then it gets kind of interesting when it gets built. So we have a weird environment. If this was an aircraft, it'd be like Boeing designing and building and delivering an aircraft to, say, American Airlines, and they operate it. And it's kind of like about as complicated as with big things like aircrafts and what have you. With buildings, it's very complicated. So one of the things I've seen that's helped over the years to facilitate that technology is cloud technology. This is kind of like obvious, but not stated enough in our field. Is before, like when I started, everything was on your computer, it was on premise, on your individual computer. I mean, you had some shared network folders from a local office server, and you would save all your stuff there for the project, and you have your own stuff on your computer. But then if you had to exchange anything 10 years ago, you couldn't do too much big file exchange through emails, so you had to use zip drives or CDs or something like that. So that kind of like friction to exchanging data, and construction has a lot of big data file formats, a lot of data to exchange. That's been eased up over the last decade, where data became really cheap on the cloud, and the technology to connect those data points on the cloud has really improved, where just about every major vendor or let's say every technology vendor we work with, whether it's Autodesk, Trimble, Esri, Nemetschek, you name it. Think about technology, use their a company's technology we use on day-to-day for building technology works. And even just big old cloud providers like Google and Azure and Amazon, AWS. It's so easy and efficient to use their technology. Just that cloud technology has helped in a lot of ways to facilitate the work we're doing. And I don't have to worry about where my models are, they're on the cloud. I don't have to worry about where things are being accessed, that's on the cloud. So because everything has been able to live on the cloud and people prefer it, especially post-COVID, people had to go remote, they couldn't be in a physical location, couldn't exchange things as much. That has highly accelerated the growth in just using digital off-premise technology workflows that are remote friendly. And that has been a huge push, because now all the data has to be somewhat structured. You have to have something stored in a certain place with certain access, certain permissions. So that on its own, of having all the data on our projects, and in my case, everything I work on projects, and this has been true for years, the models and related assets like Word documents and Excel spreadsheets, that's all been on some kind of cloud server somewhere. So that is great, because now with the evolution of APIs being accessible for product development, whereas in the past they were more just kind of like for tinkering here and there, and then APIs have evolved from these technology providers to make your own tools and products and apps however you want to, which has been a great evolution of how you can customize solutions instead of having to wait for like a third-party vendor to make something or develop something to your spec, you can use these existing platforms that we described and make using their APIs, then access the kind of project data you have, like a BIM model, like any kind of data assets. Some people have point clouds that they store on servers and they can view there. There's APIs that enable to access all these things and be able to customize a solution that can do something like review the model in a more comprehensive way on a 3D viewer on the cloud. Autodesk is doing a lot of great things with that over the last couple of years, is how you can use web platforms to access all the data you have in a comprehensive way. So I bring this all up because now there's very few excuses. Okay, everything's on the cloud. Everything's pretty easy to get on the cloud. The APIs are pretty straightforward to work with these days and are always getting better. So if we want to make a customized solution that handles all these headaches and hurdles of construction and design and buildings, well, yeah, is going to be some upfront effort? Sure. There's always some kind of upfront effort. Is there going to be some resources involved in cost? Sure. But it's never been easier. So now we have all these great solutions available that we didn't have even 3 or 4 years ago. And all these complex relationships we were talking about, the triangle, the owner, designer, builder, just to get something built, can be facilitated with out-of-the-box tools from different vendors and technology platforms. But also you can customize. So that's the big thing to get on, is to do anything sophisticated like create 3D, to create assets and to create something like a digital twin. You can now customize that. You can have a developer, you can customize solutions with each developer, and you can release that for a project at a very low impact to the project budgets. That's something I've been working on for a couple of years, is how we get those customized solutions out in a way that's convenient and easy, and we don't have to add too many things. We just use the existing platforms we have, and that's been something I've been realizing it's been a big benefit.
Incredible. I think one of the I love the fact that you also describe, right, not only the advancements in the industry itself, but the fact that widespread innovation, like a cloud, right, like cloud technology, has been something that's been spurring and utilized by the industry. Cloud is only one thing, but when you're really looking at it from a broad perspective, there's a lot of technology applications today out there that's servicing other industries that could be implemented in the construction industry. That's just a thought of mine, right? And just an opinion. I think that the construction industry can definitely lend a lot of innovation, cross industry. And I think another thing you said is there are no excuses in some sort of way, right? There's so many ways to build new tools and maybe make, even just like you said, like customizable tools, to provide solutions. And so it just kind of leads, like, why do you think it's not happening? Why do you think there's, right, you did discuss the complex, I'd say, owner, designer, builder relationship, but maybe we can even get into, I love examples. So maybe either you have examples of like technologies you've over the time, like had an opportunity to use on a certain use case and it ended up being helpful, or the other way around, those hurdles, like just showing up in reality in your face when there's an actual opportunity to make something more efficient or do something in a more innovative way, but then it gets blocked.
One example I really like to show off and talk about, because we learned a lot of lessons, and it was a good example of what we could do, but also how we did it better, was my experience. At the time I was working at HKS Architects. They do global projects, big projects. One of the projects they worked on was a campus facility project for a school called University of California, San Diego. It's a pretty big university in San Diego area. And this is an example of like taking lessons learned and evolving it. And what we ended up getting on this project was a very large facility, about 1,000 beds for housing students. It's like a dormitory for people living on the campus. But it was also mixed use. It was like 5 towers and a large parking structure and a whole quadrant or a whole section of the campus. So it was over 1 million square feet, which was about 100,000. I think I'm getting this right, square meters. I forgot if it was 10,000 square meters, 100,000 square meters, but do 1 million to meters and square meters, you'll get 1 million square feet to meter squared, and you'll get the idea. It was big. The owner at the time, the camp, basically the owner and operator was University of California, San Diego, the university itself. They managed the whole thing. And they didn't have a plan of what they wanted to do with the digital assets of the project. They were known for historically, hey, give us CAD exports of every floor plan, which were like, okay, they've been doing that for years because they want something, but they didn't know what else to do. And this is like 2017. It wasn't very long ago when you think about it. So at HKS, they have a high standard of using BIM, and I was the BIM manager at the time for that entire project. It was like 25 HKS staff just doing design. We had another 20 odd people doing different engineering efforts. And then we had a whole construction team, but it was called design build. And if people are not familiar, that means that the architect team and the building construction team work together closely, meaning they talk to each other directly by the delivery method here to deliver the contract requirements to the owner. This is what University of California, San Diego wanted. So you guys have to work together as much as possible, as closely as possible to get this thing done in a short amount of time. Design from beginning to end took a little less than 2 years, which is super fast in that area. And they had to build it out in another 2 years on top of that. So 4 years from idea to completion, which is in California, it might as well be the speed of light. So you guys have to talk to each other all the time. We want good results from this project, and they have to qualify and be accepted on those bases. So the HKS had excellent BIM models. We literally modeled everything in 3D, including the furniture, the rooms. We have tons of room data, facades, interior floor plates, everything was in BIM, and we had lots of data. We tagged every piece of furniture, what the furniture did, which room it was in, everything was in BIM. Every part of that project was in BIM, and that was architecture, that was every engineering model, and then the derivatives of taking that to the construction side, where they took all that content and added to it for shop drawings, construction drawings that they can use for buildability with excellent BIM content. The contractor in this case in the United States, Clark Construction, they had excellent VDC. They scanned the site with 3D point clouds from drones they use, because it was a big multi-hectare site. So they could either do it with like the old-fashioned way of a survey, or there's let's use drones. And again, this is like years ago. And so we had point clouds of the site, and we had excellent BIM models, and the owner was like, wow, you guys are doing a great job. How do we take all this stuff and make it useful for an operational asset that we could use to track tickets into a facility maintenance? Because of course, with universities, they have a ton of facility maintenance. You don't want to, if you have this big of a project, you have hundreds of toilets, you have hundreds of sinks, you have doors everywhere. So you have to make sure everything gets fixed. So it's like, how do we make this so we don't use the old-fashioned way of using a call or binder or something? How do we integrate this to our facility management system? IBM Maximo is their system. So how do we take our digital system that right now is just logs and looks like spreadsheets? How do we connect that to all these great models and other assets that have been vetted and developed for years in this project? So we have a kind of a map of all these buildings with all these 3D furniture that we developed just to get the documentation out. And so they want to use something like let's say a digital twin derivative of all this. And they said, hey, maybe we can build this on the backbone of perhaps Autodesk Forge Web Services and connect the data from the BIM models to the IBM Maximo using these web APIs. Again, I brought that up in the past. Customize your APIs and from these vendors who say, okay, here, use our APIs, make your own stuff. That's what they want to do, UCSD. But because this came after the contract was signed, like a year or two after we had the contract rolling, it was an ad service. So they did some budgeting there, and they're like, this is going to cost us a couple $100,000, something like that. And they didn't have the budget for it, but so let's come back and maybe the next project we work on, we'll do this. I was like, okay, well, that's a shame, because we had all this great stuff. Like, it was a really good example of how the architects and the builders got a ton of awesome content in there that we just did anyway. Nobody asked us to do it. HKS would already do those kind of BIM models. Clark would already do these kind of scans. So it was there. This is an example people have probably seen in projects themselves where they had lots of great assets. It was right there. Nobody asked them to build it. They had where there was the BIM model, the field technology for scanning and photographing and all sorts of things you can do with field technology. Point cloud, you name it, it's all there most of the time, or parts of it are there. And then we had platforms that could connect the API, that could connect the data from an API to a custom solution. If it's not there, you can customize it. It was all there, but the budget wasn't. So we're like, this is unfortunate because everything was lined up, but we didn't have a plan. Fast forward a year later, this is 2019 now, and the same exact university, UCSD, University of California, San Diego, was like, hey guys, do you want to do the exact same project, but on a different side of the campus? So we ended up getting another project with them, again, about 1,000 beds, dormitory, mixed use, 1,000,000 square feet. I mean, if you look these projects up, it's called a North Torrey Pines UCSD, and then the new one's called Future College UCSD. You'll see how similar they are in just configuration and programming of the typology. And at this time, the university came with the game plan. It's like, hey, we like what you guys did last time, HKS Architects. Do it again, but this time, here's our entire template, the book they made of how we're going to use digital delivery, facility management content. So the owner came prepared. The owner was like, this time, and this is like a year after we had to drop the proposal for the facility maintenance data integration to a digital twin. It was like, this time they said, we're going to upfront upload everything we need for facility maintenance logs, facility maintenance data, and how that model environments we're going to get is going to help us integrate that from the beginning to the end, so that if the project, and that project's slated to be completed next year in 2023. This is by the time it's turnkey ready, meaning inhabitable, people can start using it and living in it. We'll have a facility maintenance model that will include all the tagged assets in the BIM model, loaded, ready to go, so that we can do the fixes and repairs and get logs going immediately based on having tagged information in the model. They gave us a whole template to work with. They said, you guys need to work with us. Here's our template. You fill it out, architect. Come back to the owner side, the UCSC side. Let's talk. Let's make sure we're all happy with these results. And then we can move forward there with having plans. So we had reviewed it. We stated all these different BIM goals that we had in mind, from using BIM as our one source of truth for the modeling process. Nothing outside, a design process, nothing outside BIM should be useful. Meaning, like, if you're going to make something that we're going to design and build in this project, it needs to be in a BIM format. In that case, it was Revit. In that case, it was on BIM 360. So it was in one place, easy accessible, data was there. We would use BIM to author all the essential components, tagged components with Omni-class data that the owner wanted for their facility maintenance logs, and feed that into Maximo. We would use the BIM models also to do things like do estimates, so we didn't have to print it out PDF and mark up the PDF. So the models literally told us how much stuff was in there, which you could already do, and tell us how much delta change between one week's version to another. So we knew how much concrete came in when in a given week to help us reduce the cost of concrete, that kind of thing. We used BIM to help us do visualizations, so we could take it into a VR environment or walk through. They didn't just have to look at a floor plan. So we said, okay, everything will start with our BIM models, and it's everything we're doing from beginning to end to the time you close out this project and get ready to hand over all this tag data to the owner. It's going to be BIM centric from one set of models in one place that we can then use and manipulate because it's on web platform APIs. And that worked out very well. We did a lot of great development that was beneficial for the team, beneficial for the owner, beneficial for everybody trying to, on the one hand, design and build a great project, and on the other hand, save time and effort by integrating as many processes as possible. And the lessons learned there was just talk early and often with everybody how you're going to innovate this. So it's not just you, Mr. Design technologist, this is the manager, the VDC person, because we all know how that feels. We're all like isolated off in a corner, like, hey, you guys you're good at this stuff, go figure it out. But you really do have to talk to your project executives, the owner, your partners, and say, guys, how do we make this work? We all have these great things, and usually most projects have lots of great data. How do we make it work? Let's talk. Don't put me, you have to kind of stand up for yourself a little bit and encourage, hey, I can make your project more profitable and superior if you just work with me here on what we have. I think we can take it to the next level and make you guys stand out. And how we can support the owner that kind of pursuits what they need to stand up and stand out, so the owner sees that we can help them in things they were thinking about. UCSC, the first project we were doing, really wanted a better facility maintenance system because, given the university has hundreds of buildings. So if we had chatted them up a little bit, like, what are you guys trying to solve? What's your pain points? Because found a way early on to address that with our BIM models, but that came back around the second project I talked about. And we're able to help them because this is something they want to do. A lot of owners, whether private or public, they just want better information to help them take care of the projects long term. Data is valuable to them as well. So if you can talk to your team, talk to the owners, see if anything's possible. A lot of those integrations and examples talk about are possible because now people get their minds churning and they realize it's not much added cost to any of this. It's just using what you already have to deliver something that can be of great use over a lifespan of a building for years to come. I mean, these university campus projects are not going to last for 10 years. It could be 40, 50, 60 years, however long until you may have to, replace them. But that's a long time, right? I mean, you have, Cambridge and Harvard buildings are hundreds of years old. So if you start this out the right way, you can have great assets for generations to come. That's the kind of payoff people see, and they want to get more of it. And I've been seeing a lot more owner requests over the years about how do we take these BIM models, make them something useful to us. They're vetted, they're not junk, they're not just for graphics. They actually represent something. Deliver it to me. Now they're in the RFP, the contract. You as a designer or builder are contractually obligated to deliver them. So everything we talk about is how do we get that contract there? So the people on the project don't know anything about technology the way you do. They might know some things, but not everything like you do. How can they avoid risk by understanding those terminologies and how they'll help the owner? So that's an example where everything the first time around was there, but we didn't use it. And the second time around, the owner saw, the light and wanted to work with us and deliver a great project because we already had everything we needed. We were prepared. And so the owner worked with us. So that's an example of how we took it from there. It's really just communication. That's the big takeaway. The technology is there. The people's ability to do this usually is there, or they can be trained without too much, hardship for anybody. It's not that hard to train people on this stuff. It's just communication, coordination, just the human stuff that we always have to deal with. That's the big lesson learned. Be aware. You could be the best technologist out there, but if you don't appreciate human communication and the kind of messiness of it all, and how to address that, and how to communicate effectively, the value and the process, you're not going to be able to get very far. That's been my lesson learned for the last 10 years. Technology is great, but if you don't know how to communicate and how to get the right people together, if you're not a great communicator yourself, it's going to be really hard to get anything done.
Yeah, I love it. And I think a few of the things that really stood out here is, first of all, you guys, because of the level of BIM that you guys use and because of your high standards, right? You implemented in the project, you gave the owner an opportunity to really see what kind of value he could get if he was to utilize it to its fullest capacity. And right, and you were rewarded with another project at the end of the day, which is something really important for, I think, across the industry. People have to recognize that owners do get smarter. Owners do understand the value of technology. Maybe not at first, but definitely, I definitely see it that companies that are more open to innovation, more willing to adopt new methodologies that either could be cheaper or at the end of the day help with the more long-term perspective versus just the project. Get their project done, end up being rewarded by many, either it's by returning clients or by new clients who are like-minded. And I think that's incredible. And same thing with the maintenance. There's this misconception a lot of times, I think, when people talk about the construction project or the construction process, that it ends, when the project ends and when it turned over, right? At the turnkey. But the truth is that houses, right, and facilities and buildings, they live for a very, very long time, and we end up maintaining them, right, for a very, very long time. So it's so important. That awareness, I think, is critical. And the fact that that you really pinpoint the communication, I'm totally bought on that. That's the big part of really anyone innovating, is they have to be in touch. They have to communicate also with the industry, but also with the actual players who are building. A lot of times you get these guys who are just who come up with this good idea, but they're just disconnected. It's something that makes sense, but at the end of the day, if the guys in the field aren't going to want to apply it, it's not happening, right? So you have to be appealing. You have to communicate the message, the value well, and I think that really stands. That I guess it stands out for you. That you've managed to communicate it, managed to get that message through. That's incredible. We're actually kind of we're over the 30 minutes, but this is so much fun. I could continue forever, right? So right now we're gonna have to wrap it up. We do have The last question that I like asking is, you know, where do you see the future going? But maybe just like 2 words on that, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, I'll say the future is going to get bigger. That's my answer there, is because 10 years ago, like I talked about my early career and how everything evolved, I thought, okay, it'll be like BIM is great. We'll definitely use it to our advantage. But then it was BIM and, the modeling and plus VDC, the process, scanning and, clash detection. Like, okay, this is important too. But it was also field information and data, which came big data and cloud information. Okay, we have to use cloud too. Then it's like, okay, now that we have everything here, you can actually use APIs from the cloud service providers to connect to other databases and other clouds and create custom products. And okay, we got to take care of that too. We got to get that involved. That was the whole UCSC example right there in a nutshell. And now I'm like, wow, okay, now we can connect all these data points and connect long-term repeatable solutions like a digital twin, like a facility maintenance system, data we can use as a asset, because now you have all this data over time as time series of data that will grow. So it's getting bigger. That's what I'm saying, bigger data. So now it went from this kernel of like a BIM model to just growing almost exponentially until you have this huge data set around the building environment. How often are the lights being used? What's the temperature inside the building? Which kitchens, if you have a kitchen, how many people are in the kitchen at a given time, with some kind of like sensor reporting activity in there. So, if you have too many people in the kitchen and you have to remodel your office, that kind of thing. So it's everything getting bigger, more comprehensive. So nothing's really going to slow down or stop in our field. It's going to just get bigger and more interesting. And this is where the value of somebody who knows the fundamentals can come in, which you can say, okay, this is when we need to get started. This is how we can use our data to our advantage. This is how we can prepare the architect, engineer, builder, owner to get the most out of what they want. So when they pay, $500 million for a project, they only spend a little sprinkling, a little fraction of that on the handover closeout data. So all the stuff we just built for years and years gets useful and something for years to come in a cheap way, but it's also very valuable. So how do we make that low-hanging fruit of, let's get this data we're already working on in a cheap way to be used long-term in a big way to benefit everybody involved and make everybody successful and build a better project for everybody in every way. So that's how I see it. It's getting bigger. Pay attention to all the trends of technology and just keep in mind how to be innovative and a communicator. And that's where I see the next 10 years is more of that. It will not stop. It'll only keep going.
Thanks for sharing your insights. Thanks for taking the time. This was really enjoyable and was super interesting. And thank you for taking the time, getting on the podcast. And I'm looking forward, hopefully in the future, maybe we'll have you back on again. Anyways, so thank you very much. And everybody,
thank you so much, Eli. It was a pleasure. We got to do this again soon.